Welcome back here to another episode of the Big 12 Huddle. As always, here I'm your host, Calvin Glenn Alexander, and on tonight's episode, I'm joined again by Saturday Warrior, BYU. So, Trevor, how's it going? Saturdays, I always forget.
No problem. Doing well, Cal. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, hey, so glad to have you on here again. Want to go through a couple different things here as the Big 12 Media Days head over to the West Coast, it seems, at least to Vegas. Want to talk a little bit about where future Big 12 championship sites could be. Also go through just a little bit here of, hey, All-State, Big 12, maybe there's better sponsorships ideas. I've seen you tweet out several different graphics and things. I love the Big 20 possibility ideas, but I don't want to spoil it. I'll let you kind of roll that out here in a minute. And then with the schedule and times being released here, so we get kind of more and more into it, week one of the Big 12 schedule, what's the best matchup? So with that being said here, I don't want to spoil it. I don't want to take it from you. But what do you think the best ideas you've heard so far of if the Big 12 takes on a sponsorship idea and goes, hey, you know what? Maybe it's the All-State Big 12, or what other options do you think we could have?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've seen a lot out there, a lot of, obvious ones going for the truck stop conference, throwing out different truck stops and Buc-ee's. I don't know if Buc-ee's has as broad of a footprint throughout the Big 12 territory, though. So, I mean, there's a lot of good ones. I personally put some together. You mentioned the graphic for all of the FBS conferences, and I put one. What I put forward, and can I share it actually on here?
You should be able to. If not, I think I could here real quickly and easily. But I'll see here if you did first.
So I will go ahead with this then. So, so I put it together, and let's see if I can share it on. So mine actually for the Big 12 goes off a little bit off the assumption that perhaps maybe you have to share it on there. You have to add it.
We're working on it right now, but go for it. Yeah.
Oh, no problem. Yeah. So kind of off the assumption that maybe we add a few more schools, potentially from the ACC, we make it to 20, and then our potential sponsor there could be Dos Equis. And so obviously incorporating the X from the Big 12 logo and putting that right in there pretty seamlessly with the existing Dos Equis logo. Now, that's not necessarily probably a brand that BYU would love to have sported on their jersey, but, it's a way to represent that brand while also keeping with the identity of the Big 12, I think, pretty seamlessly. The rest of these are somewhat tongue-in-cheek for these other conferences, like Conference USAA and the Capri Sun Belt. I don't know. Any of these, do you think?
I think the American Airlines Athletic Conference is definitely the more kosher one so far that I've seen. That would work real well. But I got to say, personal favorite here is the Securities and Exchange Commission Conference. Put the SEC in there. That's a very, very hopeful one. Also, the Capri Sun Belt. I mean, I love the way you went with it. Mountain Dew West. So if you're not watching this on YouTube, on the College Huddle at YouTube, you're missing out because we got CUSAA and all the graphics just look seamlessly put together here as well too. Big 10 lots. I don't know. Don't want to give everyone away. But if you're reading through it, the personal favorite is the SEC Securities and Exchange Commission, just because it's the right colors. It fits in seamlessly. You've got it made it out like a logo, like it's a seal on something. And what is it? 2024 even got forward out there. So it's just great overall.
That one was actually funny because I was like, what does the SEC? I'm sure they had some sort of seal, whatever. I went and grabbed it and I put it on there, and not even intentionally. I was dragging the SEC logo and kind of let go, and it fell right into place on there. I was like, it's done. It just fit. It was just meant to be. All sorts of these. So you got the ACE CC. So anyway, Big Lots works for me. I think about half of the Big Ten teams probably belong at Big Lots anyway. So I don't think they would appreciate that branding, but as far as I see it, I think it goes pretty seamlessly. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. So my thoughts on this more seriously is, I don't know. I think that, well, first of all, I love that the conference is thinking outside the box, that they are looking for whatever alternative sources of revenue streams that they can go after to continue to keep the conference financially competitive with the other conferences, primarily, the other Power Four conferences, but mainly the Big Ten and the SEC. We know that it's all about trying to close that gap and stay competitive, especially in this shifting landscape as we continue to see the change with NIL. We know there's going to be revenue sharing, and that's going to be hard for a lot of schools to compete. And so I think we have to be creative, and there's going to have to be some give and take, in this new world of essentially this isn't amateur athletics anymore. So we know that all of this was coming in, and it's just a matter of time. And so for those out there who hate it, me too, but we also have to recognize that it's happening one way or another. And so Big 12 may as well, I guess that I'm trying to put the positive spin on it and talk myself into it, is we may as well get out in front of it and really help shape it and benefit from it. And literally capitalize on it. What is your first reaction upon hearing that news?
I guess my first reaction is, okay, Allstate seems like an interesting choice. Insurance company that's all over college football. All right, kind of fits in with everyone's seen an Allstate commercial, or 30,000 of them watching college football on a Saturday. So it's not just outside the norm. It's not like we're putting, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, is sponsoring it, right? So that's kind of a nice thing there. But in all reality, the ACC seems to be just falling apart at the seams. They cannot figure out a way to get with ESPN going forward, and Florida State, Miami, several other teams in that conference won out. And it seems to be because of money. It seems to be that each of those schools in the ACC goes, we could go make more money if we just join the SEC or the Big Ten. And the Big 12 over here is going, you know what? We could see in the future teams like BYU or Oklahoma State, who are able to attract top talent in the nation and, really do good on a national level and have a national brand, just move over to the Big Ten and the SEC. And all of a sudden it just becomes, there's two conferences, 20 teams each, and that's it in college football. And I think this is a way for the Big 12 to go, like you said, hey, we know we don't have as much money as the other conferences. We know that there might be a Power 2 forming. We don't want to be kind of relegating how much we can spend towards coaches, probably athletes here in the future, definitely NIL-wise, but just kind of paying athletes in the future, just period, it seems, is kind of inevitable at this point. And also on just stadium building as well, too. If you're attracting the top talent, you want to get in with the coolest, flashiest, best things on campus. So what are other forms of kind of monetary value that we can bring to the table, and other ways that we could seek to get the Big 12 on a higher echelon and just a bigger payoff for each school so they are incentivized to stay? The number one thing I think about with this is that UCLA and USC did not leave the Pac-12 because they didn't like playing Stanford and Cal and Utah and BYU and others, right? They left the Pac-12 because they went, hey, the Big Ten teams are making this much money, and we could go make this much money. And it's really, when it comes down to it, sadly, money runs everything kind of at the end of the day in college sports, for sure. And this is a way for the Big 12 to say, hey, you know what? It might be the All-State Big 12. That might be a couple of jokes here and there for a season. But then after that, we're on the same playing field. We have the same playing surface as the other teams in the other conferences that may want to kick us down to a different tier when we're at least able to spend like them and hopefully stay on the same pace.
Yeah, in terms of brand, Allstate is not the worst. Like you said, as college football fans, you're very familiar with Allstate already. It's all over the place, and for me, like, I've never loved corporate branding. So I actually grew up in Michigan, so I was a Detroit Teams fan. Loved the Palace of Auburn Hills. Now the Pistons play in Little Caesars Arena.
Yeah.
Just completely corporate, and you hate the sound of that. I love BYU. We played for basketball in the Marriott Center, which yes is a corporate brand, but is also an alumnus. So, and it's his last name, and so while it's corporate, it's also at the same time fits right in with naming buildings and structures on campus after alumnus and donors and things. And so, while it kind of fits both of those, so it feels a little less corporate. So All-State is obviously more corporate than that, but it still kind of feels like it could be a conference name. It's All-State. We're in all states or across the country, sort of I don't know, imagery. I still don't love it. I think for the most part, people will continue to call it the Big 12, which is why I think they want to rebrand the whole name of the conference instead of just saying Big 12 brought to you by All-State or the All-State Big 12, because I think they want, look at Twitter. I mean, nobody's calling it X. Everybody calls it Twitter still. So I think that's something that they're like, hey, we're going to pay a lot of money. We want people to actually use our name in there. And so I'm guessing that's why. I think it'd be really weird to call it the All-State 12 because we're not at 12 schools anymore. If you're rebranding, I don't know, you could be the big All-State. It sounds like they're looking at perhaps just the All-State conference. So I don't know how that's going to shake out. Like you said, it's about finding a way to stay competitive financially. And my thing is, when I heard about it, I was like, okay, well, how much is it really going to be? Because if it's really helping us close the gap, that's great. If we're going to essentially sell our soul, which I know sounds like hyperbole, but it's really not. It's the identity and brand of the conference. If you're going to sell that off to the highest bidder, you hope that you're getting something significant back in return. And now it's coming out that it's looking like $2 to $3 million per school per year, which to me does not. I mean, I don't know. I'm not in there looking at their financials. I'm sure some schools are looking like, yeah, I would love $2 to $3 million more each year. But to me, that doesn't really significantly help close that gap. And so is that really changing the dynamics of these schools being able to compete? And maybe it does. Maybe it moves the needle just enough. But again, I think if the price tag is right, then it's like, okay, it helps us stomach the news. But $2 to $3 million does not strike me as a significant amount to really change the way we're able to compete with those other conferences.
Yeah, I go back and forth of, is this a bigger change for the future of, okay, once we get All-State on board, does more money start coming in from other sponsors? And then all of a sudden we're going to have sponsors, looks like on the field and all that type of stuff here too. So where does the money stop coming in? How much money is too much money in college football? I don't think anyone thinks there is a limit, and there probably isn't. But what are the best ways of the Big 12 trying to aspire to be on the same level as the Big 10 and the SEC? And if you can get some more money in the door to keep the schools that keep winning the Big 12, right? I mean, is KU going to join the SEC? I remember seeing that on Twitter for a couple seconds here and there over the past 2 weeks, because it's like, oh, wait a second, maybe they want to go play basketball in a different conference. And the SEC would love to bring them in for basketball, and football, they're on the rise right now and stuff like that. But then again, I look at it and I'm like, okay, but you're Kansas, like you're really, really good in basketball. No question about that. But every other sport is, you're hoping to be relevant. And I don't mean that to slight him. I just mean that it's what I'm seeing in front of me. So does BYU ever go, hey, you know what? The Big Ten is it's an elite conference. They just asked us to join. We're thinking about it, and we could make an extra, I think the rumor number is $10 to $20 million more a year. Why wouldn't we go? And if all of a sudden they're trying to poach teams, I just like the Big 12 at least is looking for ways to get more money in the door for the teams right now to at least try to do something. But I'm with you. I don't know. I don't think $1 million or $2 million makes a huge difference year over year, but hopefully it makes it somewhat of a difference when all these coach contracts and all type of stuff are just going through the roof as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. You got to be able to pay to have the best to continue to appeal to these athletes, to come in and play. I mean, you mentioned continue to find other sources of revenue. And I just think, we have a few schools rebranding their uniforms lately. We saw TCU this morning, Baylor recently. And what I've noticed is they've kind of cleared out some space. Are they making room to put on sponsorships patches on those uniforms somewhere? Is the future? Are we going to look like NASCAR with logos all over? I mean, that would bring in more revenue, but it's just, I don't know. After a certain point, it starts. I don't know. It may just be something. I mean, I don't think it'll be that drastic that soon, but I wouldn't be surprised if very soon, we start seeing, a patch here or there. We've already seen it in professional sports. So I don't know. Yeah, there's other ways to do it. I guess another thing about it is if the Big 12 does this and it's successful and the other conferences feel like they need to, they can go out and do this. This isn't really a competitive advantage unique to the Big 12. They could go out and do the same thing. Now, they probably don't need to because the financial gap is such that they probably don't need to. You could probably get one or two, boosters to come in there, with deep pockets to say, hey, I don't want a corporate sponsor on there. Let's just, I'll front you the money. But, they could if they wanted to, and maybe even make more for doing it and having that associated with their brand. So I don't know. I don't actually think the SEC, in the case of the Securities and Exchange Commission, is interested in footing that bill for the conference, the SEC. But they could if they wanted to. So not that. I mean, the SEC could bring in a sponsor if they wanted to, and so then it just opens that gap right up again. And so I don't know. It's disheartening, but it's the reality of things at this point. So if it does go forward, so be it. We can still get college football, and I would prefer that to not having a Big 12. You mentioned the possibility, or of the conference getting poached. Yeah, I would assume that BYU, just like any school, would take that invite if it came. Now, realistically, I know that BYU is not on that list. There's probably a lot of schools that would come first before BYU, just based on the criteria and things that those conferences look at. So I don't think that's something we have to worry about. But yeah, we could see other schools from the Big 12 eventually getting poached, depending on how big those conferences want to get. And again, I don't know if that $2 to $3 million more is going to be enough for them to say, you know what, I'll just stay put.
Yeah, I'm really curious because every article I read right now says, hey, you know what, the new deals with ESPN and Fox that the SEC and the Big Ten are getting are going to be around $65 million a year. And that's for the Big Ten. The SEC is north of $50 million as well. And the Big 12 is looking at, a much smaller contract. I mean, we're looking at payouts of $22 million a year. I mean, this is all from New York Times and The Athletic, but $22 million a year for the Big Ten and SEC schools, and then $12 million for the Big 12 per school. And when you're talking that almost $10 million difference a year, I think that makes certain schools go, okay, you know what, are we going to just see college football just kind of no longer necessarily need the NCAA to oversight and no longer really need conferences necessarily. And instead, at the end of the day, just go, hey, you know what? We're going to have 40 teams and that's it. And hopefully the Big 12 is in the position where we've got Oklahoma State, BYU, and a couple others that are relevant and right there to go, you know what? Hey, we're at the door. We would love to also be in that group of 40 or group of 50, whatever it ends up being, because I think the days of 125 teams could theoretically, granted, I don't think that's realistic, but 125 FBS teams making it to the college football playoff seems like we could be headed to just more and more games, more and more money, but also the athletes getting paid out as well too. Which when that comes around and it's no longer just the NIL deal from donors, I think that's also going to be where we see money suddenly goes from being we're going to renovate the stadium to nope, we're going to have several 5-stars or 4-stars, whatever, on the roster because we need to try to pay them to keep them around. So no matter what, I don't think this is done changing anytime soon, right?
No, it's not. And I'm surprised this is the first we're hearing of it, honestly. And I wonder if they let it finally leak out or come out just so they could start testing the waters and seeing, fan reaction and everything, helping get people used to the idea, because it sounds like we're still a couple months away from it. But honestly, I don't see them turning it down at this point. I think it's out there. I think it's probably happening. So it stinks. And also when it comes to, we talk about logos, when we talk about Big 12 and all these conference logos, I think the Big 12 is amongst the top easily. I love the logo and its simplicity and the way it looks on the uniforms. And the other thing, Allstate, corporations usually have very strong brand guidelines that they have. Will they allow us to put a patch on there and adapt it to each school's own color scheme and everything as it goes on the patch, or is it just going to be this, light blue, whatever, the Allstate blue patch on everyone's uniform? It'll blend in better on some than others. Like on Oklahoma State, that blue is going to stand out quite a bit.
Yeah, it's going to stand out no matter what. Whereas BYU, almost no matter what, it'll look at least somewhat, the color of your hat here or something close to it would be their logo, right? So it fit in real well, at least be cohesive along with, Kansas and maybe Houston a little bit with kind of red, white, and blue. But besides that, I think it'll stick out real badly on some K-State and Oklahoma State uniforms for sure if they don't let the color schemes to be changed a little bit here and there. So, and we know how big the uniform deal is because, as you said, Baylor, TCU, they're releasing new uniforms and redoing their whole kind of branding, it seems. Oklahoma State, not too long ago, redid the jerseys. I think it was 2 seasons ago. And then TCU this morning, Baylor last week or 2 weeks ago. So, real interesting overall. But also want to talk about here is that the Big 12 Media Days are going to Vegas because AT&T Stadium, Jerry World is actually taken and does not have the space available for the Big 12 Media Days. So there's just basically just timing and scheduling is why that happened. But I want to talk to you a little bit about how that we've got schools from almost the whole West Coast, but BYU and Utah and the Arizona schools all the way over to the East Coast of UCF, where the regionality aspect of it, of, hey, we want to have the Big 12 championship in Dallas for baseball. We want to have the Big 12 championship for football also in Dallas. And we also want to have the Big 12 championship for basketball in, weirdly enough, Missouri, but kind of by a hair here because it's really in Kansas City. So when it comes down to Big 12 championship sites, what's the weirdest one right now that you think of as a fan who's, a huge fan of a school in Utah that doesn't see their school really in the championship aspect as far as playing in their own state or anything close to it?
As far as the existing sites?
Yeah. What do you think about what's the weirdest existing site that you think of right now? I mean, I personally think it's kind of the Missouri deal because they don't even have pro basketball at that venue. But I think that's the weirdest one for me so far.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, Texas makes total sense for the Big 12, especially, historically. And Missouri, that one is weird. I remember when that venue was being built in Kansas City, and a lot of people, thought, oh, does this mean an NBA team is coming? And, no team came, but we continued to use that. So I really don't have issues with it. I was really excited for BYU to join the Big 12, and that kind of meant all of it. I wasn't like, hey, we're joining, now you guys need to cater to us, especially because when we first joined, we were out on an island a little bit from everybody else. Now we're incorporated a little bit more. So that, that makes sense to me. And now that we're expanding both East and West, it's still these are very centralized locations. I saw something once that if the capital were to, the U.S. capital were to be set today to be the most centralized place, you'd probably want to put it in somewhere like St. Louis. So having it in Kansas City isn't so far off. We got teams all over. It makes sense. They're great venues and it works well. I don't know. There's still, I think, the bulk of the teams within, and those fan bases within a relatively close distance. So that makes sense. The only question is, does it also make sense to have rotating sites? I don't know. Maybe you start building up the brand or, reaching out or, kind of encouraging those fan bases from those other schools to show up. I think BYU has a good showing kind of wherever they play. And so that's the one thing, we had during independence is our national fan base. So BYU played all over. I myself am on the East Coast and would make it to every East Coast game that they would have. And so it's For me, that's not a big deal. I could see, these other schools saying, hey, well, why don't we mix it up a little bit? The fact that we're doing media days in Vegas makes sense. I mean, Vegas, everybody holds conferences there. That's, across all sorts of industries, and these are, sometimes global, countries or companies, or I guess, events, bringing in people and companies and whatever from all over the world. And so Vegas makes a lot of sense, and it's reaching out to the westward flank of the conference. So maybe you come up with a way to have alternating sites. Maybe you do something a little more eastward occasionally, or in Florida or something, to appeal to the eastern schools in the conference. But yeah, for me, it's not a major deal. I mean, you're someone who's a fan of a school, of one of the original schools of the Big 12, with these traditions. I mean, how would you feel about it moving from these sites?
I'm still ticked off that they moved the Big 12 championship in baseball to Arlington, just because, hey, it used to be like in the backyard. I mean, I'm from Oklahoma City and used to be able to ride my bike with my dad down to the, a AAA baseball stadium, which seemed to be about the right fit to play Big 12 tournament baseball, just because you could really see, okay, there's 13,000 fans out here and it looks full. Whereas you put it right now in Arlington, 13,000 fans in a 40,000 seat venue just does not. I mean, it doesn't look like it's full. It doesn't look like it's even well attended, even though it's the same amount of people, if not a little bit more. And it's in a bigger metropolitan area too, of course. But I would love for it to be kind of rotating sites, because then all of a sudden you go from, okay, it's going to be in Kansas City, Missouri, where KU's next door and K-State's next door for basketball. What kind of advantage is that? And then also for anyone who's like, hey, you know what, TCU and Baylor get to play in their own backyard for football and baseball. I totally understand that as well too. I would love to see where it rotates a little bit. Now, I would go directly to the just, hey, you know what? We've got Arizona and Arizona State. They're going to be the host teams for the Big 12 championship in football, and it's going to be played in Glendale, at the Cardinal Stadium there, and not necessarily in Vegas, where no school is located right next door. But the same kind of deal. UCF, are they able to host it? One year, which a little bit of a stronger stretch there, because they are the only one school in Florida. But Ohio, could they? Cincinnati, kind of hosted as well in the Bengals Stadium, just because, hey, at football one year, it's, hey, it's indoors, it's beautiful, it's, shiny and bright, all type of stuff, and Dallas Cowboys Stadium, and all of a sudden it goes to the Bengals Stadium, and you're like, all right, well, you know what? It's going to favor different teams in football, and it's going to favor different teams overall, and what aspects they do, because as you and I know, when we see teams play in the rain, just sloppy things happen. From last year, our matchup, and it could just change the whole outcome of the game too a little bit. I do get playing baseball indoors, just because in the spring, Big 12 tournament, seems like just it's always bound to happen, where in Oklahoma City there are always just rainouts or tornado issues or just kind of weather stuff here and there. But with football, play it indoors, outdoors, do whatever, but kind of move it around, where it's just one of every 4 different rotating sites just every so often, so we can kind of see, okay, you know what, this year Oklahoma State gets to play in Dallas. All right, well, a third of OSU students are from Texas now, and that seems like that's a very favorable deal versus, if Oklahoma State plays, for example, BYU in Big 12 championship this year. I know BYU fans are everywhere, but I got to think there'd be more Oklahoma State fans in Arlington versus BYU fans, because of the proximity, and how close it is to Oklahoma State, and how many fans are just from Texas that go to Oklahoma State as well. So I wouldn't want to see it favored necessarily, year over year, and would also love to just see kind of the change happen as well, and love to see basketball move around as well too. It could go to Talking Stick Arena in Phoenix, and kind of have the same deal with those schools. They could go up to Salt Lake City and play in, Utah, BYU there in that arena. Could come to Oklahoma City, play at Paycom Center if they wanted to as well, for Oklahoma State kind of to host. Could go out to Florida and Miami kind of area for UCF and play where the Heat play, and be another good, just kind of big recruiting tool as well too. If you have the championship sites all sudden down, and UCF's technically, could be the host here, but all of a sudden you got Big 12 playing on the weekends, and all of a sudden you see Big 12 tournament in basketball. That's a ton of fun, a huge huge atmosphere, great thing to go to. And yeah, it's not packed out to the brim every single game, so playing an NBA arena is also a little odd. But then again, like they're already playing basically in the NBA arena or an NBA type arena in Kansas City, where it really favors K-State and KU, and I'd say KU more than K-State just at this point because of how big of the basketball school they are. So, yeah, we'd love to see the guy go up to Cincinnati, and it's kind of close to, of course, it's close to West Virginia as well. So, we'd love to see it just rotate overall, to 3 or 4 different sites, every couple of years where. 1 year everything's in Dallas, the next year everything's in Florida, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it'd be a lot of fun. It could add just some kind of like a recruiting aspect as well to the conference too.
Oh yeah, that's interesting thought to have it even outside of some of those hot spots. Because I was thinking, Vegas is kind of neutral, although obviously advantages the Western schools. But I wonder if, and maybe they're not big enough venues, or probably everyone doesn't have it, but you can make it like the NFL style model where everyone's like kind of putting in bids to try to get it, and then they become the host. Could you even do it on campus, or maybe you do just stick to technically neutral sites, like you could do it at the Delta Center of the Jazz, even though obviously that's going to be Utah and BYU, but that venue could certainly do it. So yeah, there's some interesting thoughts. I think there's a way. I guess I have no problem with the tradition of the current locations, but I do think that there is a way to continue to build this out and to find new sources of revenue and build up those fan bases in these other locations and kind of create that excitement around, so it's not just the same in the same place. So I do think there's a strong argument to that, and there's probably a way to even bring in more revenue through doing it as well. I got to go back though and ask, Big 12 Media Days is every year. How does there become a scheduling conflict? I mean, it's not like we didn't know this event was coming up. How did that happen?
That's a great question. I have to say, I know this was said a while ago, of, hey, you know what, they're not having the Big 12 Media Days this year in Arlington because of, whatever they've got going on. And I'm trying to figure it out right now as we talk and see what's kind of going on down there, because, it seems like there's got to be a concert or something else going on, or it looks like Copa America actually is this year around the same type of dates that just takes over, Copa America. So that seems to be the deal here. Is they just went, hey, you know what, we're going to fill up the stadium with tons of fans and tons of huge soccer fans as well. So go for it. But it is weird to me that it's not, hey, you know what, why don't we just push it a week or two? But then again, I guess the media days are really just not going to change. That's one thing where the schedule and the timing aspect of it for football is going to be a certain amount of weeks out and a certain amount of weeks ahead of time. So that's going to happen at a certain date and time. And then what the venue happens to be is, basically up to whatever. I just don't know why, for example, it can't be, why couldn't it be, in Arizona, at the Glendale Stadium or whatever, just actually at a Big 12 school site, or at least closer? Because, Vegas is cheaper to go to than other cities just because it's a big city, but it's west of Arizona and west of Utah, technically speaking. So it's just kind of a fun place to do once a year, but it is weird that it wasn't just, in my mind, better thought out of where we're going to have this host site. And it seems like it might be maybe, again, kind of a recruiting deal of, hey, you know what, Big 12, it's all of a sudden out here in Vegas, but I don't think we're trying to recruit UNLV to join the conference, though. So it's interesting overall.
No, but that could be appealing to if we start getting a footprint there, because the Pac-12, obviously Vegas was their home. Other conferences do it too. Mountain West, the WCC, they have conference tournaments there, but the Pac-12 was kind of part of their footprint, and now it's a little bit vacated. It's a chance for Big 12, and I wonder if, instead of pushing media days, they looked at it and said, hey, here's a chance to kind of explore what these other, holding these these events in other venues could look like. And so maybe it's just kind of exploratory and seeing how it goes to test the waters with moving some of these other sites. But, we get in there, because I remember the big deal was not letting the SEC into tech, obviously they're in Texas, but we still want to make Texas a Big 12 state, and keep that as a core part of the identity. But at the same time, there's a chance to get in and say, hey, let's not let the Big Ten get their footprint at Vegas and have a strong presence out there. And it's a great venue that, if games are being played in Vegas and stuff, maybe that is a selling point to recruits.
It definitely could be. I mean, Vegas is all the glitz and glamour in the world, especially if you're there for a weekend. I've gone to NBA Summer League a couple of years in a row where I've gone, hey, you know what? Sunday, I'm good. I need to leave the town, but hey, if you're coming in for a game for a Big 12 championship, why not? So it's a great place to have it there. And, if all of a sudden it's 1 year, they will have everything with the New Oakland A's kind of moving to Vegas as well. They'll have baseball indoors, they'll have football, they'll have basketball arenas. So have it there 1 year, have it in Houston the next, and then move it to Dallas as well too. So kind of just keep it moving all over because we know then Arizona, then Florida, et cetera. Just keep moving around, keep trying to recruit amongst the other schools. So I think it's a good idea overall. But lastly here, I also want to talk to you a little bit about the week 1 matchups. We're getting the schedules as the timings, everything getting rolled out here every so often. So definitely want to talk to you about a little bit about the week 1 Big 12 schedule here as I pull it up. So if you're watching this on YouTube, that is definitely the place to go for this, just to see kind of the whole mock-up. But want to ask you, I've got week 3 here selected because that's kind of the first time we see Big 12 schools play each other, and far as Arizona and Kansas State. But then week 4 is where it's maybe the official start of the Big 12 season, if we want to say, just because that's when Oklahoma State plays Utah, and a bunch of other matchups happen as well amongst the Big 12 schools. So what do you think is the best matchup? I'll just say kind of between week 3 and 4, because we do have that one Big 12 matchup in week 3. But what do you think is going to be the best matchup here for college football?
Between both weeks, 3 and 4.
Yeah. I mean, week 3's got one Big 12 matchup there, so I'm just kind of trying to throw that one in as it also counts.
The UCF at TCU, which sounds like it could be a fun one. I think, obviously, you're looking for some of these top matchups. I think if I were to rank them, probably the Utah-Oklahoma State. Now, obviously, both schools are coming in projected to be near the top of the conference. I've seen it go around that this could be potentially new fun rivalry between the two schools. A lot of similarities between the continuity with coaching and the success over the last several years. So I could see that being a fun one and seeing if it really plays out. Now, I don't really like dubbing rivalries before schools have even played. I like to let them play and let those rivalries develop naturally, but that is going to, I think, be a fun one. Some others that stand out to me are going to be, well, actually, this one may not be as pretty of a game, but the Arizona State and Texas Tech, I know they had an old, longstanding rivalry that could be kind of fun to see that reignited and see if that's one that takes off. They seem like two schools that naturally could really have that rivalry continued, and we'll see if it comes back. But I think Kansas and West Virginia could be really interesting because both, I think, have potential to do some damage in the conference this next season. West Virginia obviously felt pretty slighted and overlooked last year and overperformed. And then Kansas is, I think, going to pick up right where they left off from last year and could really be in the mix. Personally, I'm biased. I think Kansas State at BYU just sounds fantastic. Well, it sounds fantastic now. We'll see how the game goes. But, just whenever we waited so long to be in the Big 12 and we've waited for this moment. So anytime we get one of these real old school, classic Big 12 schools coming and playing at LaVell Edwards Stadium and playing at home, I think that is a huge deal. Obviously, people think back to the Cotton Bowl when BYU and Kansas State played, and so I don't believe they've played since then. So it'll be, I think, a lot of fun there, although may not be on the radars of your casual fan to the same level. But yeah, I think we get some good ones right off the bat. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, the Oklahoma State, Utah matchup's the one that I have circled on the calendars because I think it's going to be the toughest game this year that we play. I think at Kansas State the next week is also very tough. But I think this one's the toughest matchup because, like you said, the coaching aspect there. You've got Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy, but you also have Cam Rising, 7th-year quarterback, and Alan Bowman, 7th-year quarterback as well too, trying to show out and see who the better QB is. So I think that one's a lot of fun.
And people say BYU has old players.
Yeah, that's also BYU's got a little bit of some older guys there, but I also think that this Baylor at Colorado could be really interesting because Dave Aranda right now is on the hot seat, and Deion Sanders, of course, just anything he does is going to make national media, it seems. So how does Dave Aranda and that Baylor squad go up to Colorado and knock them off? I don't know who will be favored when we get around to it, but right now I would think Colorado might be favored just because Baylor didn't do great last year, and Colorado has 2 day 1 draft picks next year coming up. But yeah, I think that's kind of a sneaky matchup of, okay, does Dave Aranda get fired mid-season if they go up to Boulder and don't come back with a win, and all of a sudden Colorado beats them? That could be really just a way for Colorado to go, hey, you know what, we're not just all hype, and stuff like that. And I don't think Baylor's that good necessarily either. So I think that could be a good one. And then the Arizona K-State game, I think that one's going to be one too, where that's also a highly ranked matchup, 2 top 20 teams in the nation. And okay, is Arizona for real? I mean, I assume you watched them a lot more than I have, of course, because they were in the Pac-12. But I just don't know about Arizona. I'm very iffy on them, and for them to be ranked 11th in the country just makes me a little curious to see how they'll play against what I think is a really good K-State team with Avery Johnson now quarterback 2 for K-State, and them saying, "Hey, see ya, the old quarterback," and he transfers to Ohio State, so he's got to be good. But I'm curious what K-State does here and how they are against Arizona on that kind of Week 3 matchup as well.
Yeah, I mean that's going to be the fun thing with this is all the new matchups and schools getting familiar with each other and seeing, what kinds of rivalries do come out of it. The one thing I don't like about these larger conferences is that we lose some of that continuity. So you might have, a great game and you're like, oh, it's heated. You can really see this turn into something. Then you take a year off and then, you don't play for a couple of years and maybe that cools down. So to me, that's a bummer with it. But yeah, chance to definitely see a lot of new and interesting matchups and see who kind of prevails from that. So, but I also look at this, you're just talking about Utah coming and obviously, yeah, that's going to be, I see that circle. It's interesting that it's so early in the season. Because that one really could have implications for the championship and potentially could see those 2 schools play again in the championship game. Which if that's the case, then I prefer that you have kind of a season, a lot of games in between before you see that rematch. Because a lot of times you see it's like the final game of the season. Like you saw Utah play Oregon and they beat up on Oregon. Then they played them like a week or 2 later and then they just beat up on them again. It was just a repeat. But so could keep it interesting that way. But yeah, Utah outside of Oklahoma State, they've got a very favorable schedule. I don't know if that was the conference's, if it just worked out that way, or if that was the conference's attempt to try to keep, a school, ranked really highly to improve our playoff standings and whatnot. But for the most part, I mean, they do have Arizona, but at home. But you look at the schedule, they've got a lot of the teams that are either slated at the bottom or even if they are in that upper part, they're still kind of that bottom upper part. Because you look at Iowa State, TCU, potentially UCF, but none of them are really in that upper echelon, at least at this preseason, right? Everything could change once the season starts. So they do have a relatively easy schedule versus BYU. For example, we get Oklahoma State and we get basically all the top schools coming to our place. And so it's going to be interesting because I think BYU definitely has a chance to make a bowl game, but they need a lot of things to go their way. And this was an interesting debate going around on BYU media circles and stuff recently, but talking about, would you rather have your toughest games at home or on the road in a season like this? And at first blush, you might think, yeah, I want the tough guys at home because it makes it easier. But if those are games that we're going to lose anyway, I'd rather have the games that are like a toss-up at home to improve your odds of winning some of those easy games. So it's like, we get Oklahoma State, Kansas State, Arizona, all at home. I think BYU, as they've shown over the years, when they're playing well, they have a chance to beat anybody. That doesn't mean they're better than anybody, but they have a chance to go in there and compete and win any of these games. So you hope that they win some of those, especially at home. But anyway, so that's when I look at that, I think, yeah, Utah, definitely has a favorable schedule, but I like that they're going to be playing at Oklahoma State for that game. I assure you that Oklahoma State will have gained a lot of new fans during that game, a lot of new support, because I think most of the Big 12 will be rooting for you over them. How do you like that you'll be kind of the de facto representative for the rest of the Big 12?
I think it'll be very odd. I like it. Would love more Oklahoma State fans as always, but it does seem like an odd place to be just because we've always been, the second team in the state, OU, of course, and that would just it'd be a fun place to be, but definitely be a little different for sure. Looking through that BYU schedule, though, you're right. You guys play 4 preseason ranked teams. I know stuff can change during the season. Utah plays 2, and Oklahoma State here, I believe we also play 3, if not just 2. So it does seem like, wow, at the end of the day, BYU is kind of getting a little bit of the shaft here, or the short end of the stick, because we played 2 ranked teams preseason wise. Utah plays 2, and K-State, the other kind of conference type of favorite, they play 3. KU is 22nd, and we'll see by the time they play KU if their quarterback's actually able to play this year, just because he's been injured the years before. The one other thing, though, to make just from the scheduling notes here that I was looking at and was very curious about is, how in the world is KU favored to beat Oklahoma State as far as it goes to getting to the Big 12 championship? KU just has better odds overall. And that has baffled me quite a bit until I actually looked at the schedule. They play 1 preseason ranked team this year, and it's K-State. And it just seems so odd that they also play Illinois, all right, but you know what? They're a Big Ten team who's not part of the conference, grant, so it doesn't matter there. And the rest of KU's schedule just seems like this is really set up for them to have a little bit more of a cupcake walk to the Big 12 championship if they actually are worth all the hype. So that was just the other kind of scheduling note I had here as well, because I was looking up and down going, how in the world would KU have better odds to make it to the Big 12 championship than Oklahoma State, a team that was there last year and returns 20 starters as well? And then I look at KU's schedule and I'm like, okay, well, all right, well, the Lindenwood Lions out of Kansas City, Kansas, didn't know they existed. Granted, I don't think anyone really is paying too much attention to these kind of cupcake non-conference schedules, but Oklahoma State gets a lot of flack for playing the no names of the world, and this year we're playing maybe the best FBS or FCS team, excuse me. We're not playing the Lindenwood Lions, at least. So I'll hold our thumb in the sky and be very happy about that one. But yeah, the rest of the KU schedule here, I know they go at West Virginia, which is never easy, but I'm making concessions for them if I keep doing that the rest of the schedule, because they basically play at K-State as their one tough game in the year, and the rest of them, at BYU will not be easy. Don't get me wrong. I'm worried about playing, LaVell Edwards, but it's just, you guys are ranked to start the season. And KU, I'm looking at, I'm like, okay, you play 1 preseason ranked team this year. It's wild to me how much easier their schedule is compared to some others.
Yeah, true. And you also have to look at where it falls in the schedule too. So, for BYU, we've got 2 ranked teams at home. So granted, it's at home, but 2 ranked teams followed by a trip cross country to UCF. So, that little stretch right there is just going to be brutal. And that's all leading into a bye week before our game against Utah. So it really is, the schedule can determine a lot. But yeah, you're right. I was wondering that too. And I think you made a really good point. It absolutely is the schedule. So for example, this year, I think BYU is going to be better than we were last year, but our schedule is even tougher, that I think our chances of really making a bowl game are kind of the same as they were last year. So even though we've progressed, our schedule is that much tougher. So yeah, that's going to make a big impact on it, and see how things shake out. I don't know. I wish some of these, just speaking of how the conference or the schedules shake out, is I wish we had more of these rivalry weeks, that build up. It's weird to me playing Utah not on the final game when we're in conference. I mean, during independence, we played them all over, generally at the front end of the schedule, but even in a bowl game. But I don't know. And I'm looking at some of these. I think maybe when is Farmageddon? I think that's even, is that at the last week? Okay, so that one is at the last week and maybe that's why. Maybe they're just trying to stagger some of these big rivalry games, so they've got interesting Big 12 matchups, each week throughout conference play.
Yeah, I think it's going to be kind of weird as there's just so many teams in the conference now. If there's not divisions here coming shortly, that'll make it kind of odd. Where Oklahoma State, like, we do not play several schools that we played last year again, and we don't play Kansas, for example. So we are always going to have a couple different schools you face every school year, and I would much rather at least face a couple of schools that we just build a rivalry up against, because our old rivals of OU and kind of playing a rival to Texas as well, just they're gone. So now who's going to be the rival here going forward? And I really wish it was just kind of a dependable, okay, we're always going to play K-State, for example, every single year, or Utah every single year, no matter what. And I mean, back-to-back years we're playing K-State here, which is nice to build up a little bit of rivalry. But you're right. I would hope that in the future here, there's much more of we always have these schools every single year that we're playing, these 3 to 6 teams or whatever, and the rest are always switching in and out, depending on where they're kind of in their own division as well too. So
yeah, we'll see. It's interesting because everyone seems to be moving away from divisions. So I don't know. That would be. It does make sense, but it doesn't seem like that's the trend anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately. So we'll see, though. I'm real curious how this all works out here at the end of the day, because college football, as we know, is just not going to stop changing anytime soon. At least it seems, for the moment. So, I don't know. With that being said, Trevor, any other final thoughts here as we kind of wrap this one up?
No, thanks for having me. Yeah, it is wild times, and the summer when it's slow and we're usually having to dig up silly things to talk about, there is plenty to talk about because the landscape is just changing so much. And so, it's rough. It's going to take some getting used to, and with all the sponsorships, all the paying of athletes, everything, the sport is changing, but hopefully it changes for the best, and the Big 12 is able to continue to be innovative and staying at the top and the forefront of that to stay relevant.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as always, it's great talking to you, getting catch up a little bit more on the BYU Oklahoma State stuff. But always great talking about the Big 12 here and an ever-changing conference with maybe a sponsorship here in the future. But hey, I'd take the Dos Equis sponsorship any day. So we'll see. That sounds a little bit better than Allstate. But that being said, please follow at College Huddle here if you're not already, or at the College Huddle on Twitter, Instagram, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Follow Trevor here at Sats Warrior BYU on Twitter /X. And also, Trevor, where can they find your podcast as well too?
Same on. I'm on YouTube, so same handle there to get us on YouTube. So come check us out.
Wonderful. And as always, you can catch at the CGA Tour is my podcast covering all about Oklahoma State on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and wherever you listen to podcasts as well. Thanks so much for listening. We'll catch you guys again soon.